So let's create one more mixin. Now, currently in our project, we seem to be rewriting a common pattern for styling our font size, line height, font weight, and color. So for example, here in our H3, we're defining a font size, a color property, and the line height. And we can also see this pattern in other places, like in the body and in our H2 rule. Well, sure, we can keep the font declarations as is, even though they don't accept color values, and that's fine. But let's see how we can use a mixin to help make writing these properties a little more convenient for us. So back in our mixins.scss partial, let's include a comment that lets us know that this is our text mixin. And let's create a new mixin by typing @mixin, and let's call it text. So our text mixin will accept 4 arguments, one for the font size, another for the line height, one for the font weight, and finally one for color. Now, the only required value will be for the font size. So let's first declare an argument for that. So we'll call it size. And next, let's set our line height argument. We'll call this one L height. Let's also set one for font weight. Let's call it weight. And finally, we'll set the color argument. I'm going to call this one color. So the next thing we're going to do is set the default values for line height, weight, and color to null. And what this does is it will make them optional arguments. And by setting the values to null, we're not outputting any CSS for the 3 properties unless we pass a value for them when including this mixin. Take a look at the teacher's notes for more reference on the null data type. All right, next we're going to write the properties for our mixin. So first, we're going to add a font size property, and the value for that will be the size variable. And right below that, let's write a line height property, and we're going to make the value for this the L height variable. And right below that, we're going to add the font weight property, and this will accept the argument weight. And finally, we're going to write a color property, and the value for this will be the color variable. So now the values we enter when including this text mixin will be dynamically passed down to their respective properties. So if you've used mixins before, you'll have noticed that where we include a mixin in a rule is important because it affects the output CSS cascade. So it's usually best to include mixins first in a rule, followed by the rest of the declarations. So first, we're going to include our text mixin inside the body rule. So as the top declaration, we're going to say @include text, and then we'll pass our arguments. So as the font size value, let's pass 1em, and the line height will be 1.5. And since we're not passing a value for font weight in our list of arguments, since it doesn't need one, we'll need to let Sass know that we're skipping it by including the next argument in the list and the value we want to pass. Otherwise, Sass will assign the wrong value to a property. Now, there are ways around that, but it's beyond the scope of this course. So we're going to skip the line height value and define the color value next. So we're going to have to type the color variable in our argument, then define the color value. In this case, it's the color text-based variable. All right, so now we can actually delete the color declaration in our body rule, and we're going to keep the font stack variable. And now we're only going to define the font family property. And for that, we'll make the value stack Helvetica. Right? Looks good. So let's do another one. We'll scroll down to the H2 rule. And as the top declaration, we're going to say @include text. And let's pass our list of arguments. So as the font size, go ahead and copy this font size value, paste it in as a first argument. Then the line height is 1.1. And the font weight will be normal. and there's no color for this one, so we're going to leave it out. So now we can delete the 3 declarations below, save it, and let's take a look at the browser. All right, so that looks good. Everything went through just fine. And right below, let's do the same for our H3. So as the top declaration, we'll say at include text, and as our font size argument, we're going to say 1.25em. Our line height will be 1.2. So again, we'll need to define the variable color in our list of arguments. And this time the value will be the color variable color text dark. So now let's go ahead and remove the 3 declarations below and only keep the include and the margin bottom declaration in our H3. So let's see how that looks. We'll save and refresh, and everything looks good. So go ahead and add the rest of these on your own wherever you see fit in the project. Now, in the Advanced Sass and Modular CSS with Sass course, you'll learn how to build more advanced functions and mixins to handle font sizes and line height. Again, these are all just suggestions to make our workflow more efficient. You can do things differently if you'd like. If you prefer writing out the full declarations, that's also okay. Just remember, the key to dry code is not repeating yourself when writing code. It doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be repetition in the CSS output. And finally, there are actually some benefits to using mixins over extends. So I've added some great reference material on that in the teacher's notes.